No, I wasn't in the battle. We were supplying water again. We was on water supplies. I was on water supplies most of the time through the desert. Sometimes ammunition, petrol, but mostly on water supplies.
Just going back to Alamein for a minute, can you tell us what you experienced? You know, if you weren't in the battle,
Well,
what can you tell us about what you saw?
well, you could hear the battle going on because it was up the road. I mean, we weren't actually in the firing line. Well, sounds horrendous. Explosions going all over the place, but we couldn't see anything. We weren't actually in the front line. Yes, when Montgomery arrived, he ordered the ground guns, and I think there were 300. There were 300 guns. There were 10,000 rounds fired, I think, from these guns. And they opened up 1 minute before midnight. We were one side of the road and they were the other side. We couldn't see them. And whilst they were doing that, our troops were advancing under that fire to them. And you couldn't hear a thing. I mean, it was just tremendous noise going on all the time. You couldn't talk because you couldn't hear one another. And at night time, the sky was brilliantly lit as though it was bright sunlight in the middle of the day. And this went on for about five days, I think. And my brother-in-law was one of the gunners, and I met him there. Then later on, he met me again when the war was over and we were up at the other end of the desert. I think it went on for 4 or 5 days, and then they advanced because we had pushed the Germans back and the Italians. We were fighting two armies. And this just went on and on. And finally, we got up to Tripoli and it ended. But we were still supplying water, and I was put onto a vehicle with another driver, and we were loaded up with 2-gallon cans of water, a truck full of water. And they were what we called flimsies. They were very thin tin canisters, and they used to leak. And we advanced not on the main road by the coast. We advanced over the rocky desert, which was rocks as well as sand. So we were only advancing very, very slow, just us on our own, with this one vehicle full of cans of water and 2 drivers, the driver himself and me with him. We were both drivers anyway. So we could only go very slowly, and just as we got to the brow of this hill, we got no idea where we were. Suddenly, thousands of Germans and Italians came rushing towards us over the hill and surrounded us. Of course, we stopped. We didn't know whether they were armed or not, but after a few seconds we could see they were unarmed. And they were prisoners. This was the German and Italian army had given themselves up. Rommel had gone back to France, but he got killed on the way by Spitfires firing at him. Apparently they killed him in France. And this, there's all these Germans and everything, and the Germans were shouting at us, Trinkenwasser, Trinkenwasser. We didn't know what they meant because we didn't speak German. Anyway, this driver said, I think they're asking for water. He said, well, we've got a lorry load of water here. I said, well, we can't give it to them. We've got it for our troops. He said, yeah, but we've got all these leakers, and by the time we get where we're going, they'll be empty anyway. He said, but we don't know to give them the full ones. Climb in the back if you can. He said, sort these leakers out and give it to them. And this is what I did. So I found about 6, 7 or 8 of them and passed them out to them, and they couldn't thank us enough. Thank us, thank us. And they all disappeared off in the distance. Where they went, God knows. We never saw any more of them. When we got over the ridge, we found we were in Rommel's headquarters. What was Rommel's headquarters? All these massive white tents. And when I looked inside, along on there was a concrete pathway in front of the tents, and all officers' equipment, their big pack and their small pack that they wore on their back, were loaded up with all their equipment ready to be taken away. But of course,
how did you know it was officers' equipment?
Because they had a fur-lined back. When you put the pack on, between the pack and your back was a fur pad, and only officers had that sort of equipment. We didn't have it, nor did ordinary German officers. Only the officers. So there's all this officers' equipment lined up with their watches in and all sorts, just got left behind. Because whoever was supposed to pick them up were captured anyway. So it was still there. And when I looked at the far end of it, I could see boxes of something or other. And I thought, well, I could see plastic sort of blowing in the breeze. So I go and have a look. And they were these shields, little shields, we haven't got them out yet, but the shields. And so I picked one up and brought it home with me. And it looked as though people didn't know what they were, so they left them there, because there were other troops there. This is the plaque that I found at Rommel's headquarters. We couldn't use the road because the Germans had blown it up Hellfire Pass. So this is why we were coming up on the rocky side of the desert, and the Germans surrounded us. After I found this plaque and all this German gear that was lined up, I turned around and was looking around the camp, as it were, and there was this little single-seater aeroplane standing there in perfect condition, a German with a black cross on the side, green camouflage, and it was just standing there in perfect condition. So I thought, well, I'll go and have a look at that. So I walked over to it, to the door, just a single door. It was only a single-seater plane, and as I got to the door and looked through the glass, there was somebody sitting in it. And I think it was certainly a German top-ranking officer. It must have been Rommel's, in place of Rommel. He must have taken Rommel's place because Rommel had gone back to France. And it must have been, he must have been in charge of the army, trying to get away, and he didn't get away. and Hitler had already given out orders that if they were captured, then they would take the poison and kill themselves. So I looked at him, his eyes were open. It looked as though he was ready to take off, but he wasn't moving. He was a big fella. He had all the uniform of a general, you know, wasn't ordinary troop at all. And he wasn't moving at all. He was stone dead, and I thought he was alive. I mean, his eyes were open and everything else, which was quite strange. Anyway, I turned away, and these South African troops were sitting there having ersatz coffee. And I said, "Is he dead in there? He must be dead." They said, "Oh yes," and they took no notice. So it must have been Rommel's replacement, and he didn't get away. He was just sitting in the plane dead. And there was nothing wrong with the plane at all. Anyway, it was standing on a strip of grass in the middle of the desert. So where they got that from, God knows. But anyway, that was as far as we could go as far as the war was concerned, because it actually finished there. We carried on with the rest of this water supply that we had, and I've no idea to this day what we did with it. But we finished up at Tripoli, met up with our company, 406 company, and the British troops were in Tripoli lined up. Montgomery was driving around thanking them and taking the salute and everything else. And whilst we were parked up just outside, we were not in Tripoli itself. We were in some trees just outside. My brother-in-law, who I met at Alamein, came up and met me there. Again, that was twice we met in the desert. Well, they were sent back to England again, all the gunners and tanks, all the tank drivers, because they needed veteran troops to go and fight in France. They hadn't got a veteran army, only us that were out there that knew about war. So they went back, and we had to drive from Tripoli all the way back to Egypt again. Thousands of miles. It took us a couple of weeks, I think, near enough, to get back to where we started from. And we thought, well, perhaps we're going home. Well, we were put into tents, and we even had camp beds. Well, we never had camp beds. I mean, we slept on the sand, rolled up in your blanket, or in the lorry or wherever you could. Anyway, while we were in these tents, we had camp beds. I was standing at the foot of the camp bed, and a few of my mates were in this tent, and they said, "You play the accordion, don't you?" I said, "Well, I did." So someone brought in an accordion, a big one, piano accordion. And they said, "Well, give us a tune." So I put it on and I played 2 or 3 numbers, and I was standing at the foot of the bed, and suddenly I just slowly fell over backwards and passed out. And apparently they took me off to a field hospital, and I had sandfly fever. And of course, these sandflies at night time, thousands of them flew around you. So I must have got bitten, I suppose. But I had sandfly fever, and I was in the hospital, I think, for a couple of weeks. Then they sent me back to the camp where all this happened. And when I got back there was no one there. I said, well, where's the rest of the gang? Where have they gone? I said, they're on that ship out there. And there was a ship just outside the dock. It couldn't pull in, it was parked outside. And they were loading it up with a crane with these big rope nets with all the gear in and slinging them round on the ship. I said, well, if all my mates are on that ship, how am I going to get on there? Well, I had my big pack, my small pack, my rifle, everything loaded up, strapped on me. I said, well, climb up on that rope net, and when we filled it up, we'll sling you out over the sea and drop you on the deck. And that's what they did. So I managed to catch up with all my mates. We thought we were coming home. Thought, well, the ship's about to be coming home. Well, whilst I was being slung out, being that they were rope nets with foot-wide holes, there was a field radio. It worked its way out and dropped in the sea. I didn't tell anybody that. It didn't matter anyway. So somebody lost it, you know, it was army equipment. I lost the radio. So this was, we got on the ship, I got on the ship, they dropped me on the deck, and I found all my mates and everything else. And we all thought we were going home. And we landed in Italy. We didn't know where it was, except that it was a volcano chucking out all this dust. And it was a foot deep or so. We were walking through this dust. And I suddenly remembered about volcanoes in Italy. And I said, well, this must be Italy, because it was all green grass and trees and everything else. And that's where we landed up. It could have been Naples, because we've got no idea where we were. And then that was 2 years we spent in Italy, supplying water, petrol and ammunition, high explosives. So most of the time then we were running supplies of ammunition and petrol. We had to go down to the heel of Italy, where the only place that the ships could dock. There were docks down there, and the ships could pull into the dock, because most of Italy up that side was holidaymakers' sand. Ships couldn't pull in at all. They'd be half a mile away. Couldn't get any closer. So wherever we were, because we were in different places every day, we had to go along to the coast road and go all the way down to the docks at the heel of Italy. I can't remember the name of it. And we would load up with petrol or ammunition, high explosives, whatever it was, and then come back and try and find out where we had to drop it off for the troops. Well, there was only one main road in Italy going down the side of Italy. So wherever we were, we just made for that road. We knew it was across there and turned right, because the ships couldn't get anywhere else. So you had to go to the same place every day. And that's what we were doing. But But when we were trying to deliver it to the troops, we never ever knew really where the troops were going to be, because they could either be pushed back or advancing. The only people we saw in Italy were the farmers that did the grapevines in the vines, in the wineries, what do you call them? Because they were the only places that we could reverse our vehicles between the grapevines at night. There's nowhere else we could park because it was full of grapevines everywhere. And the farmers lived on the premise, on the farm, of course. So we backed down between them. We tried not to destroy anything because we knew it was a living. And mostly the farmers were elderly couples. And this particular one we were in for a few nights and days. Every time we parked up, they invited us to come and have a drink with them in their farmhouse. So we used to go and sit there and try to talk to them in a bit of Italian, and they'd give us glasses of wine, fresh wine. It was lovely. And then all of a sudden we were sitting there one night and cows started mooing very loud, and we thought, well, where's that coming from? There was a blanket sort of over an opening on one side of the room, and when they opened it, the cows were in there. They brought the cows in at night, and they had their own garage or room, whatever you like to call it. There was straw on the floor, and there was half a dozen cows in there, mooing away. No, it didn't smell. No, otherwise we wouldn't have gone. No, it didn't smell.
Did you find any of the soldiers that you were with ever had a relationship with any girls or anything like that?
One did. He disappeared, and I couldn't find him. And everybody searched for him. His lorry had gone as well, his truck, and he just disappeared. And someone said he's got a girlfriend up the road in a certain town. He's picked up with somebody, and he's gone there. We never saw him again, so we don't know what happened. He all we knew was that he'd found this girl, and he went to live with her. Took his vehicle as well. He absconded. So we don't know what happened to him. I've no doubt the army collared him, and he would have been, well, put in prison, very likely, whatever you like, you know, whatever they did. So that was one part, but that was how it went on in Italy. It just went on and on and on. We used to get shelled. We used to have to park in the fields or wherever we could at night, and of course we'd be loaded up with high explosives, shells and whatnot. And the Germans knew that we would be coming back to those fields in the evening, so they started to shell us. They would start firing at us. Whether they could see us or not, we never knew, but they were firing at us, and the shells would be exploding in the fields and so on. And in the morning, when you started to move again, they would start again, trying to get your vehicles. They weren't after you. They were trying to destroy the vehicles, obviously, because the vehicles were carrying all the stuff. So they tried to get the vehicles. We had several narrow escapes, several of us. You know, bombs were coming over, shells were coming over and blowing up around us. And it wasn't until almost towards the end of the war out there, we didn't know this of course at the time, but they put me with another driver and his vehicle, and it was a Bedford with the short nose, short bonnet, and he normally would be scared out of his life and he would put his toe down and go like the clappers. And of course the dust would come up as soon as they saw that, the Germans, even if they couldn't see the vehicle, they would try and fire at it and get you, see. He was one of these people that you couldn't quieten him down. He was lost. They put me with him on this particular morning. My vehicle was left in this field. I had a Canadian Dodge, brand new truck, with a long nose, long bonnet. Well, they put me with him and we started going along this track to get out of this field. And I said to him, Billy's name was, I said, keep it down, Bill, because normally he would put his toe down. But he kept going slowly, and then suddenly we could hear this roaring with the shell coming over. And just as I've spoken to him about this, keeping the speed down, it suddenly went quiet, and it went deathly quiet. The noise of the shell roaring stopped. And I said to Bill, Tinat, this is ours. Because someone had told me that whilst you could hear the shells roaring, you were safe, near enough. But if it stopped, it was coming directly at you. And this one stopped, and it landed right in front of the vehicle, almost hit the bonnet. Everything came all over the cab. Stones and God knows what. We thought we'd been blown up, but the truck was still going, and Bill was still driving. We went down the hole and up the other side. If we'd have been going 1 second faster, that would have been a direct hit on the cab. So I wouldn't be here, nor would he. We'd have been blown to bits.
I